What up, meatheads? This is Travis, American Butcher, and this is the Meat Block Podcast, the weekly podcast where Ryan, David, and myself take a topic in the industry and go into it in some various amounts of detail. And we talk about things from our perspective, tell stories, read articles, etc. And if you couldn't tell from my voice now and in previous episodes, I am uniquely American, along with Ryan and David. So a lot of what we talk about is from our perspectives on how we perceive our industry. And with the WBC right around the corner, it will be happening the week this episode is released. And I just want to say best of luck to anyone who is competing. And I hope you enjoy yourself if you're attending the event. And look for Neil and Matthew, say a few words, and I'll put it on the show. But in the course of building up to this amazing event, and if you don't know what the WBC is, it is our Olympics, and I've said that before, but I have had the opportunity to interview Rod Slater and the American team, as well as creeping on the other teams on social media. And speaking of social media, it is that thing that makes our industry, seem very small. Where if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you run into the same butchers often on social media. But if you take a step back from that, our industry is vastly huge. That there are many different styles of cutting, different ways to cure, different sausages, different techniques. And I feel that is lost on pictures that you see on social media. A lot of times people see the finished result and don't realize what unique steps were taken to get the butcher to that final picture perfect product. Some people may break differently in different parts of the world. Some people may break differently to achieve a desired cut sheet. I know I do. And after talking to the American team, telling me about the first time that they practiced together, that they picked up things from each other like, oh, you hold a knife like this, or you pull this that way, or etc. And it really drove home what the WBC is going to be. I would love to just watch each team individually so I could pick up techniques and apply them to knowledge I already have. I'm jealous of everyone who gets to go to this event. Well, not actually jealous. I'm envious. Jealousy is the fear of losing something. I'm not scared of losing anything. I'm envious in what someone else has. And what people have is this amazing opportunity to get together, share ideas, and walk away with more information. So in this episode, we go a little bit into things that I'm unfamiliar with and that we normally don't talk about. We talk about American cutting, we talk about USDA, custom exempt, and a lot of the things that we do here that involve the three of ours personal experiences. And that's, I view my segments more storytelling than actually educational, just because I like talking and podcasting's easier than writing a book. Although I have entertained the idea of doing a butcher coloring book for adults, like a coffee table book. I think that would be amazing. And don't steal that idea. Anyway, here's David.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. In his way, the meat cutter is an artist. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
Hey, gang. I'd like to wish everybody out there a happy and filling Robert Burns Day. To many people around the world, mostly in Scotland, this day is a celebration of the life and works of Bobby Burns, a Scottish poet who everybody thinks is real great. To me, however, it means I'll be getting an influx of orders for sheep and lamb's stomach, heart, lungs, livers, esophageal meat, what have you. Some of these things I can get legally from the plant that I manage, or I might have some things from our harvest from last year, but lungs and, trachea and things like that are difficult to legally remove from the processing floor, let alone the kill floor. The reason why I have this influx is because of a dish called haggis. It's served as the focal point of a multi-course meal to celebrate Mr. Burns and his life and death, I guess. It's essentially a pudding, or almost like a more of a moist meatloaf, I guess, made of minced lamb offal, oatmeal, ground lamb suet, spices, and a gnarly stock, maybe a lamb bone stock or something like that. This mix is then spooned into a lamb's stomach, and I believe it's the rumen, but I can't quite remember which one it is. It's spooned into the lamb's stomach, and then it's boiled. And once it's cooked, you serve it as a protein on a platter, family style. Cut it open, the stomach that is, and serve it. It's fairly crumbly. While this delicacy, which I consider to be a type of sausage more or less, it's an encased meat. It belongs to the Scots. Just about every country has its own adopted encased meat. In China, you've got lapchung, Germany, bratwurst, amongst many, many other ones. Obviously, Germany has a super rich tradition in encased meats and whatnot. This is just kind of a rudimentary list of things that come to mind. Switzerland has servelat. Armenia has sujuk. Georgia, kupati. Lithuania has skilandis. Philippines have longanisa, which is similar but very different from the Spanish longanisa. Poland has kishka, and being from Michigan, and there's a ton of Polacks here. Kishka was a very common thing on holiday tables. The English have a bunch of sausages that just taste like white pepper and mace. What is with the mace over there? I don't know. And North Africa has merguez. That's a fairly popular lamb sausage that I'm sure you've heard of. Those are some of the things that come to mind when I want to come up with an international list of things maybe I want to throw in the case as like a sausage of the week. That's something that we used to do at a meat shop that I worked in downtown Seattle. Every week we'd do something, and for a while we were coming up with kind of interesting and quirky different meals of the sausage, but eventually we started to do different things that we'd never heard of, and that was kind of a short list of things that we ended up selling to our customers, and they really liked, and it was very popular for us to come up with the new sausage of the week. And it also gave us a really great opportunity to do lots of sampling on the clock, of course. Some of these ended up not being super favorites of the customers, they're, and I could never get away with it here. They'd be super foreign to the rural American palate. But some of them are, more approachable, like bockwurst. Bockwurst is something that is ubiquitous at Oktoberfest and is very mild sausage with a little garlic and chive, white pepper. I like it with a little bit of lemon zest in it, and that one goes over well wherever you are, I've got a couple of them that are personal favorites. I named them when I was naming off that list, and they were also really popular with the customers at our shop. And one of them was longanisa from the Philippines, and the other, sujuk from Armenia and the former Soviet Middle Eastern countries, and Turkey, in the Caucasus region. So Filipino longanisa is kind of an interpretation of the Spanish longanisa, which is a bold and spicy pork sausage, basically. It's the Spanish version is mostly what you'd expect. Delicious, no doubt, but Spanish paprika, a little bit of acid, it was spicy, This version, though, the Filipino longanisa, I think is far superior. It's special. It's sweet, it's sour, it's kind of herby, it's garlicky. It's so good. It's often dyed a super bright red color, which I think, like when you go to Wajimaya or one of these, larger importer stores of Asian goods. They're like super bright red, and it's, a food coloring or something. But when you see, when we would make it, we'd either use a natto seed powder or a Hungarian paprika and just put a lot of it in there, When we'd make this at Rain Shadow, I think I would end up buying half of it every time. I just love it so much. And here's the recipe for it. So you're going to start with, I like 2 pounds of coarsely ground pork, like a real nice coarse die, and then 1 pound of your regular medium grind. And I really like it in that coarse grind when you get the chunks of fat in the center, almost as if you were going to be adding a diced fat. But I think if you use a larger plate, it's an easier, more attainable thing for everybody. Not everybody has time to dice fat and incorporate it into sausage. So you start with that. Your other ingredients, let's see, for those 3 pounds of meat, you're going to need 1.5 tablespoons of a sweet Hungarian paprika. You'll need 2 teaspoons of ground black pepper, 1 teaspoon of white pepper, 8 cloves of garlic, peeled and, totally minced. You could even spin it up in a Robocoo or some other food processor if you want. 1.5 tablespoons of salt, 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar or coconut sugar, 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar or sherry vin, I guess. That's what we had on hand, and I felt like the sherry vinegar tasted way better. And then I'd also use 2 tablespoons of rice wine vinegar, or I'm sorry, just rice wine, and then 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. So in a bowl, I combine the soy sauce, vinegar, wine, sugar, and salt. I'd stir until the sugar and salt are totally dissolved. In a large bowl, I combine the ground pork, the pork fat, garlic, pepper, paprika, and I forgot, oregano and thyme. So there's a tablespoon of each, fresh oregano and fresh thyme. And this is something that my friend who gave me this recipe lives over in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. He's married to someone with a huge Filipino family, and this is a sausage they'd make when we'd have kind of gatherings over at their house. And I remember him telling me that her secret ingredient was the fresh oregano and thyme. So anyways, you're going to combine the soy sauce, vinegar, wine, sugar, salt, stir until the sugar and salt are dissolved. Then you're going to combine the ground pork, the garlic, pepper, paprika, oregano, and thyme. And then you're going to add the original liquid mixture and just mix it until it's totally homogenized. I like to let it sit overnight, let it sit for 2 days, whatever. Just let it get some time. And that's basically your mix. Then you're just going to mix it. You're going to stuff it into your hog casings. And, these ones generally when they're presented are kind of like, they're almost like little chodes, like short and fat. I'd say a 3-inch sausage in your standard brat size casing. And it's delicious, Anytime I cook brats like this, I like to boil it until it's cooked and then brown it on the outside. And these are perfect that way. Second one. This is one of Hamsaw Joe. I've mentioned him before in previous podcasts. I worked with him in Seattle at a butcher shop. Old Hamsaw Joe was a big sausage fan, and this is one of his best recipes that he ever shared with us there at the shop. It's his recipe that he got from his mom, and she's from Kazakhstan, I guess. And every time he'd make it in the shop, we'd just eat it up. It was really great. It's bold, it's spicy, and it can totally be the focus of a dinner entree or something you can get from a street vendor in Istanbul, not Constantinople. It's done up into a lamb casing, which is kind of a pain in the ass, but it's totally worth it. You could also use a collagen casing if you have those. And Joe linked them pretty long. He prefers 6 to 8 inches. He's real clear about that. So the presentation's a little bit different, and it's really great. And here's the recipe for that one. This one's an all beef sausage. So, he did everything in metric, I guess. So, and this is the recipe I have. It's 1 kilo of ground beef. Kind of on the fatty side, I'd probably do a 75-25. 2 tablespoons of cumin, 2 tablespoons of allspice, 2 tablespoons of fenugreek, especially blue fenugreek if you have it, but I know it's really hard to get in America. It doesn't keep well, and other parts of the world may be easier to get. But 2 tablespoons of just ordinary fenugreek would be great. 2 tablespoons of Aleppo pepper or goat horn pepper or anything from that particular region. 2 tablespoons of sweet Hungarian paprika. 1.5 tablespoons of salt. 10 cloves of garlic. 1.5 teaspoons of sumac. 1.5 teaspoons of fresh marjoram. And a half a teaspoon of smoked paprika. And as with any other sausage, I generally, not always, but oftentimes if I'm hand mixing, I'll add about 3.5% of the total meat weight worth of water and make kind of a paste and then toss it with the trim and then grind it, or toss it with the grind, and it helps it just kind of mix and homogenize a little bit easier. And you can either twist this into a fresh sausage, or you can stuff this meat mixture into kind of like a patty and wrap it in cheesecloth and let it hang for about a week in something 55 to 60 degrees and fairly dry. And you just let that meat dry into kind of almost like a pemmican, and it's super flavorful and salty, and it's just a smack in the face, just like hanging out with Hamsaw Joe. So I think here in America, we're mostly just stealing everybody else's sausages, but, aside from hot dogs, which we have an interesting hot dog episode that Travis and I a while ago kind of broke down the history of the wiener here in America. But if you ever get a chance, there's a super talented butcher, chef, author. Her name's Cara Nicoletti, and she's on Instagram, and she's got some of the awesomest looking broadside sausages anywhere. Super talented, and she had different flavors that I've seen, like borscht and matzo ball and I think a chicken pho link. I've never had any of them, but I've admired them from afar, and I highly suggest checking out her collection of more modern links, I guess. If you have any international sausage flavors or links that you want to share with us, or want us to include in an upcoming episode, share them with us either through the Instagram or on our Facebook account, the Meat Block Podcast group.
All right, it's Travis again, and I just want to say thanks, David, for that amazing piece. I've never heard of Monty Burns Day, and now I know. And knowing is half the battle. What is the other half? Is it a brutal fight or winning? When I'm lucky enough to get a vacation or go on vacation, one of my favorite things to do is visit local butcher shop. Like last year, I had the amazing opportunity of meeting Norm the butcher from San Francisco, or the time I met Cody at the local butcher shop in Berkeley, Jared when he used to work in downtown Los Angeles, and I look forward to meeting many, many more people and seeing more beautiful shops. I have been lucky enough to travel outside of the United States. In one of my journeys, I found myself hanging my hat in the country of Sri Lanka. Several years after the tsunami hit, I found myself living in a monastery outside of Winnipua. Their civil war just ended, and the Tamil were defeated. There was still a heavy military presence, which was a painful contrast to the natural beauty and landscape of the country. My job was simple. I was there to teach English to orphans whose parents were killed by the Tamil in the previous civil war. My family had a friend who set up 3 orphanages in Sri Lanka, all dedicated to helping women be successful. Teaching a language to someone who speaks a different language, when you yourself are not good with the written language, if you did not know, I am very dyslexic. I have a cavalier attitude about spelling and reading, in the sense that it has not held me back in ways that I comprehend. But nonetheless, I thought this was a challenge. I went down to the local market. It was an open-air market, and picked up educational books. I picked up the same book, a handheld pamphlet from English to Sinhalese translation of the book Little Women. I would go down to the market, pick up a pack of Sailor J cigarettes every morning, the local newspaper that was a Sinhalese newspaper typed in English, and then walk around the market, exposing myself to new cultures, a weird version of Western culture, and much more. I noticed that Cadbury chocolate was big in Sri Lanka. I was only ever used to Cadbury eggs in America and found this very interesting. It was impossible to find peanut butter in the country, and what they considered ketchup was far from what I did. I would walk down the beauty supply section of this open-air market and was surprised when I noticed a beauty cream called Fairly Beautiful, which is a cream that women put on their body to make them more fair, more light skin, and then its counterpart, Fairly Handsome, for men. There were boutiques that sold what I would call cowboy shirts, but like pearl button snap shirts that I wear all the time. But these buttons were just glass and no pearl. And the t-shirts they had all had John Cena on them. And at various locations in this market were butcher shops. There were no cases like you would find in a Western butcher shop. The only thing familiar to me about this butcher shop was the fact that they sold meat. Large pieces, usually a hind leg or a foreleg, hanging on hooks alongside viscera in cuts I did not recognize. I did not notice a cooler of any kind, and from what I gathered, just by observing and watching, that someone would come up, point to a cut, indicate an amount. The butcher would then take the piece of meat off of the hook, place it on, essentially, a log or a tree stump, cut off a piece of that, wrap it in pink plastic, place it on a counterweight scale, and then there would be a transaction. Now, this whole market would pack up by the time the sun sets, and I'm assuming the meat went back into coolers then. But during the day, it was hot in the 90s and very humid. And the only electricity I saw at these shops were using fans to keep the flies off the meat. To give you an idea, all the Cadbury chocolate that I would buy would also be partially melted. I was amazed by this. I didn't know how they could operate or not, or just exist without getting people sick. But this is the trip where I learned that milk is a shelf-stable product. Drinking hot alcohol is better than drinking none at all. And I put to test the saying, shop or the local shop. Because if you're a staple of your community, it's truly not in your best interest to poison your clientele or accidentally get them sick. And my students would say, don't go there, they're dirty. Go here. And I would look, and it would be the place with the longest line. They also had marketing down to a T. They had a grill cooking up wonderful smelling treats, and with their fly fan blowing the smoke and the smell of the food out into the market. I guess this segment fits into this show's idea. Well, I'll make it. I'm the showrunner. And here is Ryan.
Roughly 6% of Americans hunt and fish. Farmers are even scarcer than hunters, inhabiting less than 1% of the American population. For the vast majority of average modern folks, the meat world is out of sight and out of mind. But there is a moment, a profound moment at the overlapping of worlds, and it occurs at the point of interface, which is the retail meat service case. Common folk from all walks of life, from every background and every occupation, have a chance to stand at this precipice, to walk into a butcher shop and, for a moment, be immersed in a memory of the life cycle of this planet, the biological consequence of photosynthesis, sunlight converted to grass, grass converted into animal protein, fat, tissue, and bone. It is a moment filled with potential. When done right, when done with spirit and with purpose, it can be a profound moment. Tom Milan of the Meat Hook describes, quote, "A good butcher shop is equal parts marketplace, community center, and neighborhood bar, where regulars shop, gossip, and run into each other, not unlike the barbershops and drugstores of Norman Rockwell's America." Also, quote, "A real butcher is an institution and fixture of the community, as essential and emotionally nourishing as a church pew, stoop, or front porch, and as utilitarian as a corner store or gas station," end quote. At the center of every butcher shop is the meat display case. It is the beating heart of the butcher shop. It is similar to a train station, which is constantly in flux, trains constantly pulling in and pulling out, always moving. It is a thing that requires constant vigilance. The tenets of the meat case go something like this. Number 1, fill your holes. When a steak is sold and a hole is created, train everybody in the department to immediately push the other steaks forward to fill the gap. This will act like a Band-Aid to keep the case looking decent enough and will buy time for the meat cutters to cut more and do a more proper refilling of any depleted sections of the case. Number 2, don't show too much paper. This is similar to filling holes, similar to number 1, but it speaks more to the goal of utilizing the entire length of the tray. Especially during busy days, you want your case to give a perception of abundance, not scarcity. The fuller you keep each tray and the less paper you show, the more you will impart an idea of bounty and fullness. Number 3, along with imparting an idea of fullness and abundance and bounty, it is critical that you impart an idea of freshness also. This means having a strong and intelligent strategy for rotating wilted meat out of your case and into grind or into some other added value solution. A good meat cutter will stay on top of this very important detail. The timing of when to rotate is very complex and somewhat intuitive and takes years of accumulated wisdom to do effectively. Here's some tips and tricks. Don't be afraid to grind. Make your grind look nice and you'll sell a lot of it. Ground beef is a big margin maker if you can move it. Put paper in between steaks and roasts as much as possible to minimize oxidation. At the start of my day during setup, I would quickly cut a stack of 3-inch rectangles from the tray paper. All day I would then pull from this stack to put those rectangles in between my roasts as I was cutting and filling trays quickly to keep the lean from touching lean. Number 4, even if your meat case is kept fresh and tidy, if the ceilings, floors, and surrounding walls are not kept fresh and tidy, this will subconsciously detract from the perception of freshness you're trying to build. Meat managers must think like interior designers. Ambiance is everything. Number 5, understand the flow of customer traffic as it moves through your department. Which direction do most customers come from? Where do they linger? And what paths do they generally take as they walk through? Do customers generally approach from the left or from the right? Organize your meat case and your department so that the highest margin items, the added value items, are the first thing your customer sees as they enter your department. Number 6, have a clear sense of your highest gig items and your highest margin items. GIG, G-I-G, is an acronym for the phrase going in gross. A high gig item is one that you just plain sell the most of. You may not make any profit off of it, but people buy a ton of it. Oftentimes, beef tenderloin is an example of a high gig item. We used to sell lots and lots of tenderloin, but it made us zero profit. We just barely broke even with it. Whereas flat iron steak was our highest margin beef item. We brought in whole clods for a low price, and we would fillet the flat irons off of that whole clod and then sell the flat irons for a higher markup. By knowing the highest gig item and by knowing the highest margin item, you can then strategically couple them with each other. Put them next to each other. Use the high gig item, which draws attention, and let it draw attention to the high margin item, which is right next to it, in an effort to sell more of your highest margin items. Margin, by the way, means profit, and this is what you want. Number 7, after coupling high gig and high margin items together, the rest of your meat case and the rest of your department should be organized with strong dividers between species and with an eye for an aesthetic. Now, there are many varied aesthetics one might strive for, and it's up to you to choose a style that you feel gets you the most traction in your particular circumstance and with your particular customer base. To get an idea for the diverse options that are possible, take a look on Instagram. Some places like to put skulls and heads alongside cuts in their case. Some places like to French all the bones on their steaks and roasts to create an eye appeal. Some places use kale to border their trays and fresh herbs to garnish their roasts. The possibilities are endless. Just a couple examples here. Check out the casework of the meat hook on Instagram. Kylef 1984, he's a Whole Foods guy. Standing's Butchery, Jared Standing, Darren O'Rourke, just to name a few. Social media is a most excellent tool for touring meat cases, getting ideas, and finding inspiration. I am inspired when I see regional meat cases that reflect a local food culture different from my own. For example, the South American interpretation of beef butchery and cookery continues to humble me and amaze me the more I learn. An Argentine meat case would certainly showcase popular North American cuts such as ribeye, strip loin, and tenderloin, but they would be presented boneless, and the tenderloin, for example, would be seen as much less valuable compared to many of the other cuts in the case. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, Eye of Round would be highly coveted on holidays, and matambre, also known as elephant ear, wiggle meat, rose meat, etc., would be popular and would be sought after through much of the year. Now, most prominently displayed in Argentine meat case would be cuts that customers use for a Milanese preparation. Milanese is a staple food group for South Americans. It is an inexpensive, everyday food preparation that I've been told makes up for approximately 80% of the Argentine diet. Muscles from the beef round are seamed out and sliced very, very thin. Each customer or family will have their own preference for a Milanese sliced from the top round or from the bottom round or from the sirloin tip. depending. To prepare, these thin cutlets are breaded, pan-fried, and served together with a variety of garnishes. Also of note, the beef clod and top blade would be left connected as one giant boneless piece. It's customary to buy this either as a roast or as a long, awkward-looking steak that grills up fantastically during the Argentine asado. Asado-style grilling over a hardwood fire would be the place where many beef cuts are pointed toward. And South Americans are very good at their grilling. Beyond the asado grilling, there's also the al asador open fire cooking. Al asador means crucifix. This is where you see a whole 13-rib beef short rib or a whole lamb butterflied open on a metal cross, which is then stuck into the earth and leaned into a fire for a long, slow cooking time.
All right. Thanks, Ryan, for that amazing piece. I have something I want you, the listening audience, to do for us. If you live abroad, which I guess would be in where you live, it would be abroad from us. But if you live outside of the United States, let's say Mexico or Egypt or perhaps Uganda or Russia or every other country in the world that isn't America. Please contact us and tell us what unique items you have in your case or how the industry is and what you're selling. And if there's something that we should be talking about that you say, hey, we do this one thing that I would just like people to know, or maybe you would like to do it there in America, and send us a recipe or send us some pictures on Instagram. Because I just want the Meat Block, to help bring the community together and build a sense of community. And I believe our journey in this industry is forever onward going. That if your goal is to learn, at no point will we say we know it all. If you do, you're a terrible butcher. Even master butchers can still learn from different cultures. And I encourage everyone who's competing in the WBC to go there with the idea that this is a learning opportunity for you, and pay attention and have fun. You know, you're going to do essentially once in a lifetime thing. Just have fun with it and learn and fuck egos. Talk to people, make yourself available. And if a person named Neil and Matthew come up to you, give them a solid interview for the Meat Block Podcast. And if you're a consumer or if you're attending an event, ask questions. Be nosy. That's why this event is here, is to shed light on our industry. And if you're not going to the event and you want to know something, just ask it via social media or go someplace in person. And if the person doesn't want to share with you, unless it's for proprietary reasons, then fuck them. I hear all the time by old timers or people in this industry how our industry is dying. It's only going to die without the wealth and expansion of knowledge. People coveting that knowledge are helping its demise. That being said, I also feel like people need to pay dues and show up, but still, never stop learning.
Well, there's some big black clouds that's blowing from the west. I've been driving all day, Lord, I sure could use some rest. And there's a motel up ahead where I can unwind. 'Cause I sure love thunderstorms and neon signs.
All right, meatheads. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Meat Block Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It was fun. It was a mixed match. And I hope it got some information across. And like I said earlier, if you work in a different country in the industry, please send us your content. And the best way to do that is email us at themeatblockpodcast@gmail.com. You could Instagram us at themeatblock or tweet us at themeatblockpod. Also, we have an Instagram group, The Meat Block. and there's a lot of great conversation happening over there. If you want to get a hold of us individually, you can contact Ryan at Gather and Break on Instagram, David at A Farm Butcher on Instagram, and I am at American Butcher on Instagram and Facebook. And if you're looking for a way to support the show, honestly, the best way to do that right now is open up your podcast searching device, type in The Meat Block, and leave a 5-star review. And please leave a comment. Another way you could support us is by using the hashtag The Meat Block, like Norm the Butcher, Iverstein Farms, or Basic Butcher, Boston /Butcher. Best of luck to all the teams that are competing in this week's WBC. And I wish everyone safe travels. And if you find yourself there and looking for something to do, please find Neil and Matthew. And that was not intended to rhyme. Our outro song is by Hank Williams III, and it is a cover from Wayne the Train Hancock. And remember, keep your knives sharp and live the margin.
In a small cafe, when we stop to get a bite along the way, whenever I hear the wheels begin to whine, it takes me back to another time. Well, there's some big black clouds that's blowing from the west. I've been driving all day, Lord, I sure could use some rest. And there's a motel up ahead where I can unwind, 'cause I sure love thunderstorms